What if the person you were meant to meet was sitting right in front of you, but you didn't even know it? Sarah thought as she nervously adjusted her worn-out dress for the blind date she had agreed to. Her heart raced, her palms were sweaty. She wasn't used to dressing up, and this wasn't exactly a night to impress. At least, that's what she told herself. She had no idea who he was, only that he was supposed to be rich, successful, and hopefully kind. But what did she have to offer him? She couldn't even afford to buy a proper dress for the occasion. Her job as a receptionist didn't exactly scream luxury, and with bills piling up and her rent due in 2 days, Sarah's focus was on survival, not romance. She glanced at herself in the mirror one last time. A messy bun, a simple dress, and shoes that had seen better days. She looked ordinary. In fact, she looked downright unremarkable. But Sarah was used to being invisible, blending in with the background, so tonight felt no different. As she entered the cafe where they had agreed to meet, she immediately felt the pressure. The room was filled with people who looked like they belonged in a different world, a world she didn't understand. She sat down at a small table, looking at the clock and wondering if he would even show up. Her stomach twisted in knots. As the minutes passed, she fidgeted with her phone, checking the time over and over again. But then, just as she was about to give up, the door opened. A tall man walked in, his presence commanding the room. He was wearing a dark suit, his hair styled perfectly, and his smile, was both confident and warm. He looked around the cafe, scanning the room, and his eyes landed on her. She felt her heart skip a beat. It was him, her date. But something about him felt different. There was an aura around him, a sense of power that didn't match the casual setting. He walked toward her, and Sarah felt herself shrink into her chair, suddenly very aware of how out of place she felt. He stopped in front of her and smiled. "Sarah?" he asked, his voice smooth and calming. She nodded, unable to hide her surprise. "James," he said, extending his hand. "I'm sorry, I'm a little late. The traffic was awful." Sarah stood up, shaking his hand awkwardly. "No problem," she said, her voice betraying the nervousness she felt. "I'm just glad you showed up." As they both sat down, the weight of the moment hung in the air. Sarah couldn't help but wonder if she was truly ready for this. What did a man like James Harris, a billionaire, no less, see in someone like her? She had no idea that this meeting was about to change everything. As Sarah sat across from James, she tried her best to hide her discomfort. She wasn't used to this kind of environment. The polished floors, the soft lighting, the expensive scent in the air. Everything about this place screamed money, and she didn't belong. She shifted in her seat, her fingers playing with the hem of her dress, an old habit when she felt nervous. James, on the other hand, sat with ease, his posture relaxed but undeniably confident. His eyes were warm as he smiled at her, his gaze making Sarah feel like she was the only person in the room. It should have been comforting, but instead, it made her feel exposed, vulnerable, like he could see right through her. "So, tell me about yourself, Sarah," James said, his voice smooth, his tone inviting. "What do you do for fun when you're not working?" Sarah hesitated, her mind racing for an answer. Fun. She didn't really have much time for fun. Life had a way of filling up every space with responsibilities, bills, rent, making sure her mom was okay, keeping her head above water. But she couldn't say that. Not to him. Not to someone like James. She forced a smile. "Well, I like to read," she said, her voice a little too high-pitched. "And sometimes I go for walks in the park when I can. It helps clear my mind." James nodded, as if he was genuinely interested. "That sounds nice," he said. "I imagine it's a good way to escape from everything." Sarah nodded, feeling a little less awkward. But then the silence stretched on, and she could feel the weight of the moment press in on her. What was she supposed to say? What did someone like James want to hear? She cleared her throat, trying to break the silence. "What about you?" she asked her. Curiosity getting the better of her. "What do you like to do for fun?" James leaned back in his chair, his eyes glinting as if he were thinking about something far away. "I like to travel," he said slowly, his voice lowering. "I've been to a lot of places. Paris, Tokyo, New York, of course. But there's something about getting lost in a new city that makes me feel alive. I guess you could say I like adventure." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had always wanted to travel, to see the world, but it was a luxury she couldn't afford. She could barely make ends meet, let alone buy a plane ticket to another country. She smiled awkwardly, not sure how to respond. That sounds amazing, she said, wishing she could relate. James seemed to notice the shift in her mood. His smile softened, and he leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. You know, he began, his voice almost a whisper. Life's too short to spend it all working and worrying. You deserve a chance to enjoy it, to do the things you love. And maybe, just maybe, I can help you with that. Sarah's eyes widened. Did he just say what she thought he said? She couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and disbelief. What was he offering? And why was he offering it to her? Sarah's mind was racing. She couldn't quite believe what James had just said. Help her? How? She had always been so independent, never wanting to rely on anyone, especially not someone like him. Her mind flashed to her mother, her brother, her bills piling up at home. She wasn't sure if she was ready to accept anything from a man she had just met, no matter how handsome or charming he was. Yet, there was something about James that made her want to believe in the possibility of a better life, even for a moment. She glanced at him, trying to read his expression. Was he serious? What do you mean by that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James leaned in a little closer, his eyes locking with hers. I'm not offering you charity, Sarah, he said gently, his voice calm but filled with purpose. I'm offering you a chance to experience life in a way you've never been able to before. There's more to life than just getting by. I can help you get there. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what to say next. She had heard things like this before from people who meant well, but never followed through. But there was something in his gaze, something sincere that made her question her doubts. And why would you want to help me? She asked, almost afraid of the answer. James' smile softened. Because I see something in you, Sarah, he said quietly. You don't just settle. You keep going, even when the world tells you to stop. And I admire that. The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Sarah could hardly breathe. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. No one had ever really seen her, not in the way he did. She shifted in her chair, her nerves returning as the weight of his words settled on her. She wasn't sure if she was ready for whatever he was offering. Was it too much? Too fast? I don't know if I can take that kind of offer, she said, her voice thick with hesitation. James leaned back, studying her for a moment, before he gave a reassuring nod. I understand. This isn't something you have to decide now. I just want you to know that the offer is there. No pressure. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and confusion. She wasn't sure what to feel. On one hand, she was flattered, even intrigued. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into uncharted territory, a world she didn't know if she was ready for. But as she looked into James' eyes, she realized something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for her to step out of the cycle she had been stuck in for so long. Maybe she could have a future that was more than just surviving. The days following their meeting felt like a blur to Sarah. James' words echoed in her mind constantly, and she found herself replaying their conversation over and over. The offer, the possibility of a new life, kept her awake at night. She couldn't shake the feeling of being at a crossroads, torn between the comfort of her current life and the unknown path James had laid before her. But as much as she wanted to take a leap, fear held her back. Fear of change, fear of what it might mean to accept his help. She had always relied on herself. How could she just turn all of that over to someone else, especially someone like him? As Sarah walked into work that morning, her mind still heavy with questions, she tried to focus on the tasks at hand. But her thoughts kept drifting back to James. She glanced at the clock, counting down the minutes until her lunch break. It wasn't that she disliked her job, but it wasn't her dream. It was just something to pay the bills, something to keep her going. As she shuffled through papers at her desk, a knock on the door broke her concentration. Sarah looked up, startled. Hey, Sarah. Got a minute? It was Emily, her coworker. Sarah nodded and smiled, though her mind was still elsewhere. Emily leaned against the doorframe. I've been hearing rumors about you and a guy. James something. Is he as good-looking as they say? Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, a blush she couldn't control. It's not like that, she said, brushing her hair behind her ear nervously. Emily raised an eyebrow. Not like that. Then what is it like? Sarah hesitated, trying to figure out how to explain. She wasn't ready to tell anyone about James, not yet. He's a friend, she said, choosing her words carefully. Emily gave her a skeptical look. A friend? Girl, come on. That man is a billionaire. He doesn't just befriend people like us. Sarah's heart skipped a beat at the mention of his wealth. He's not like that, Sarah replied, her voice quieter than she intended. Emily, sensing her discomfort, let out a soft laugh. I'm just saying, you're way too modest, Sarah. You should at least think about the possibilities. You're not going to be stuck in this dead-end job forever, right? Sarah's stomach twisted. She wasn't sure how to answer. She wanted to believe that things could be different, that she could have more. But she was scared. Scared of taking risks, scared of disappointment. After all, she had seen too many people in her life get their hopes up, only to have them crash down. That evening, after another long day of work, Sarah sat alone at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. The message from James was still there, waiting. I've been thinking about our conversation. If you ever want to talk more, or if you just need someone to listen, I'm here. She could feel her heart race as she read the words again. Maybe it was time to stop playing it safe. Maybe it was time to step into the unknown. The next morning, Sarah woke up to an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. She had spent the entire night tossing and turning, unable to shake the thoughts of James and his offer. What if this was just a dream? What if she wasn't cut out for a life beyond the one she knew? But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that nothing would change if she didn't take a chance. Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the phone in her hand. She had to make a decision. She opened her messages and stared at James' text again. His words were simple, yet there was something about them that made her feel like she had a chance at something more. I'm here, Sarah. No pressure. Just take your time. She could hear the sincerity in his words, but the weight of her own doubts made her hesitate. She had spent so many years taking care of others, her mom, her brother, and now, for the first time, someone was offering her a way out. But could she accept it? Could she really walk away from everything she had known, even for something that might be better? Taking a deep breath, Sarah made her decision. She texted James back, her fingers trembling as she typed. I'm ready to talk. The reply came quickly, almost as if he had been waiting. I'll call you. How about 7 tonight? Sarah agreed, setting her phone down on the nightstand. She glanced at the clock and realized she had just enough time to get to work. The day seemed to stretch on forever, her mind constantly drifting back to James and the conversation they were about to have. It wasn't until she arrived home that evening, after a long day at work, that she found herself alone with her thoughts. She sat down at the kitchen table, the same spot where she had read his message the night before. This time, she wasn't nervous. This time, she was determined. The phone rang, breaking the silence. Sarah picked it up. Hello, she said, her voice steady. Hey, it's James, he replied, his voice calm but warm. Are you ready to talk? Sarah smiled, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. Yes, I'm ready. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was ready to take a step forward. James' voice was soft, but there was an undeniable confidence in it. Good. Let's talk about what comes next. As Sarah listened to James' voice on the phone, she couldn't help but feel the nervous tension begin to rise again. This was it. The moment she had been both dreading and hoping for. The moment where she would either take a leap or stay stuck in the life she knew. So, James began, his voice calm but confident. I want to make sure you understand what I'm offering. I'm not asking you to give up everything at once, but I'm offering you a chance to build a different future. A better one. A future where you don't have to worry about the same things every single day. Sarah's heart fluttered in her chest. It sounded too good to be true. She had always dreamed of a life where money wasn't a constant worry, where she could actually live instead of just surviving. But the doubts kept creeping in. How can I trust this? She asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her attempt to keep it steady. You don't even know me. There was a pause on the other end of the line before James spoke again. You're right. I don't know you as well as I'd like to, but I see something in you, Sarah. I see potential. I see someone who has worked hard for everything she's ever had. Someone who deserves a break. Sarah could feel her breath catch in her throat. She had never thought of herself as someone who deserved much. She had always been the one giving, the one supporting others, never asking for anything in return. But James was offering her something different, something she had never even allowed herself to imagine. I don't know what to say, she admitted, her voice soft. I've never had anyone offer me something like this. It's hard to believe. James' tone softened. I understand. It's a big step, and I'm not asking you to jump in headfirst without thinking, but I want you to know that this isn't just about money. It's about opportunity. It's about creating a life where you don't have to constantly worry about the next paycheck, where you can actually enjoy your life. Sarah's mind raced. Could this really be possible? Could she really step into a future that didn't feel like an endless struggle? She closed her eyes, imagining a life where she could breathe, where she could dream without fear. I want that, she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. I want more than what I have now. James didn't say anything for a moment, but Sarah could hear the smile in his voice when he finally spoke. Then let's make it happen. Together. Sarah felt a sense of relief wash over her. It was as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. The path ahead was still unclear, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like there might actually be a way out. A way to finally have the life she had always dreamed of. And it all started with one small decision. One leap of faith. The next few days passed in a blur for Sarah. She couldn't stop thinking about the conversation she had with James. His words echoed in her mind, making her question everything she had known. Could she really change her life? Could she really accept the opportunity he was offering her? She woke up every morning with the same feeling of doubt, but also a strange sense of excitement. It was as though she was standing at the edge of a cliff, and all she had to do was take the leap. The choice was hers, but the fear of failure, the fear of not being good enough, still weighed heavily on her. One afternoon, as Sarah was walking to her car after work, she bumped into Emily again. Emily was all smiles, as usual, her energy infectious. Hey girl. Emily greeted her, her eyes bright. How's everything going with him? Sarah stopped in her tracks, caught off guard. What do you mean? She asked, trying to keep her tone casual. Come on, Emily said with a wink. James Harris. The billionaire? You've been texting him, right? Sarah felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She wasn't ready to talk about it, not yet. It's just a conversation, Sarah said quickly, avoiding Emily's gaze. Yeah, right? Emily teased. A conversation with a billionaire? Girl, you're not fooling anyone. I know something's going on. You've been looking at your phone like you've won the lottery. Sarah chuckled nervously, feeling her anxiety rise. It's nothing like that, she said, but the words felt hollow even as she said them. Emily's expression softened, and she placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. You don't have to explain yourself to me, she said. I just want you to be happy. You deserve it, you know? Sarah felt her throat tighten, the weight of Emily's words sinking in. She had spent so long putting everyone else's needs before her own. Maybe it was time to think about herself for once. That night, Sarah found herself staring at the text from James again. I'm here if you want to talk more. Just say the word. The message was simple, but it made her heart race. She wasn't ready to make a decision just yet, but she knew one thing. She couldn't keep running from the opportunity. She had to at least try. Taking a deep breath, Sarah typed her response. Let's talk. She hit send before she could talk herself out of it. As soon as the message was sent, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. Something better. The next day, Sarah was a bundle of nerves. She had sent the message, but now that it was done, she couldn't stop questioning herself. Was she making the right decision? What if this was just a pipe dream? Something that sounded good in the moment, but didn't stand up to reality. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept wandering back to the conversation with James. By the time she got home that evening, the familiar weight of uncertainty was pressing down on her. Her phone buzzed as she dropped her purse on the kitchen counter. It was a message from James. I'm glad you're ready to talk, the text read. I think we should meet tomorrow. Let's have dinner. Her heart skipped a beat. Dinner. She hadn't been expecting that. Was he asking her out on a date, or was this just a business thing? She stared at the message, unsure of how to respond. On one hand, she was excited. Dinner meant a chance to really sit down with him, to talk face to face and figure things out. On the other hand, she felt an overwhelming sense of anxiety. She hadn't done anything like this in years, sitting down for a nice dinner with someone who wasn't family or a coworker. She barely knew James, but she couldn't deny the connection they had. She wondered if he felt the same way. Taking a deep breath, Sarah tapped out a response. Sounds good, she typed. Where and when? The reply came almost instantly. How about 7 p.m. tomorrow at that Italian place downtown? I'll make a reservation. Sarah couldn't believe it. She was really going to do this. She was going to meet him for dinner, and for the first time in a long time, It felt like she was stepping into something bigger than herself. That night, she could hardly sleep. She spent hours tossing and turning, imagining what it would be like to sit across from James, to hear his voice in person, to experience the world he lived in. She wondered what he saw in her. Why was he offering this chance? She had no answers, but the thought of taking that step, of walking into a new world, was both terrifying and exhilarating. She hadn't realized how much she craved change until now. The next evening, Sarah stood in front of her mirror, staring at her reflection. She had chosen a simple dress, nothing too fancy, but enough to feel a little special. She didn't want to overdo it, but she also didn't want to look like she didn't care. She fixed her hair, adjusted the straps of her dress, and took one last look at herself. She was ready. She grabbed her purse and walked out the door, her heart racing with every step. As she drove downtown, her thoughts were a whirlwind of questions. What would he say? How would she act? Would this change everything? But as she pulled into the restaurant's parking lot and saw James standing outside waiting for her, she knew that whatever happened, it was already the beginning of something new. As Sarah stepped out of her car and walked toward the restaurant, she couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement mixed with a hint of anxiety. The soft hum of the city surrounded her, the lights casting a warm glow on the sidewalk as she approached the door. She spotted James standing outside, leaning casually against the building. He was wearing a sharp suit, looking every bit the confident businessman she had imagined him to be. But as their eyes met, Sarah noticed something different in his gaze, something soft, almost welcoming. James straightened up and smiled, his eyes lighting up as he saw her. "You look amazing," he said, his voice genuine, making Sarah's heart skip a beat. She smiled nervously, adjusting the strap of her purse. "Thanks. You look great too." James held the door open for her, gesturing for her to enter. "Shall we?" Sarah stepped inside, the atmosphere of the restaurant immediately enveloping her, a cozy, dimly lit space with soft music playing in the background. The host led them to a private booth, and they both slid into their seats across from one another. For a moment, there was an awkward silence, but James broke it with a smile. "I'm really glad you came," he said, his voice warm and sincere. Sarah met his gaze, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. "I'm glad too," she replied, her voice steady. The waiter arrived with menus, and they both ordered drinks. As they talked, Sarah felt her initial nervousness start to fade. The conversation flowed easily, and she found herself laughing at James' stories about his travels and business mishaps. He listened intently when she spoke, genuinely interested in her experiences and thoughts. It was the first time in a long time that Sarah felt like someone truly cared about what she had to say. As the night went on, Sarah realized just how comfortable she felt around him. She had expected the evening to be filled with tension and doubt, but instead, it felt natural. She could tell that James wasn't just being polite. He was truly enjoying her company. When dinner was over, they both sat back, content but not ready to say goodnight. James leaned in slightly, his expression more serious now. "I meant what I said earlier," he began, his voice lower. "I want to help you, Sarah. I see so much potential in you, and I know you can do more than you ever imagined. But you have to be willing to take that first step." Sarah's heart raced again, but this time, it wasn't out of fear. It was out of something else, hope. She realized, as she looked into his eyes, that she was ready. She was ready to take that first step. "I'm ready," she said, her voice soft but steady. James smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Good. Let's see